John Dryden was such an influential personality in so many spheres of learning that the period 1660 to 1700 is rightly called the Age of Dryden. He was a poet, dramatist, translator, critic, and all rolled in one. Dr. Samuel Johnson called John Dryden the father of English criticism. What Johnson meant was that Dryden was the one who launched this new genre of literary criticism on its way into the world of art. T.S. Eliot echoed the same sentiment when he said that Dryden was positively the first master of English criticism, and added the great work of Dryden in criticism is that at the right moment he became conscious of the necessity of affirming the native element in literature. With a great deal of exposure to close textual analysis and rigorous evaluation of pieces of literature, we had to better realize that he was the pioneer, the first practitioner of comparison and analysis in the history of criticism. It is not an exaggeration to say that English criticism evolved from Dryden. He confessed that his chief endeavor was to delight the age in which he lived. Essentially, Dryden was a prefatory man, even as Bernard Shaw would become later. Much of his criticism is found in his prefaces. This is the starting for the criticism in the case of Dryden. Dryden uses the term examine for critical analysis, and this term was originally used by the French playwright Corneille. Dryden wrote prefaces to his plays. He practiced dramatic criticism that was descriptive in nature. This early criticism of Dryden was defensive, trying to please his audience with what he had done. Even today, the dialogue form of his famous essay, Of Dramatic Poesy, remains unique. No other critic has taken up this form of discussion. An essay of dramatic poesy, it is not only the work of criticism that Dryden published as a separate work, it was also revised by him and published thrice during his lifetime. It is also the most comprehensive of his critical works. It was an important document for his literary career, and for us, as an equally important document of critical theory, it is lively as an essay for the light, controversial opening and humorous ending. The essays of him had topical interest where the characters were real, and all the Dryden's contemporaries followed his style. Dryden's tolerance and impartiality are evident in the entire essay. He favors and defends the genre tragicomedy, rejects the addiction to the unities. He says we have invented, increased, and perfected a more pleasant way of writing for the stage than was ever known to the ancients or moderns of any nation, which is tragicomedy. Dryden had the generosity to accept the superiority of the Elizabethan drama, though he argued about the development and the growth in the dramatic form achieved by Restoration playwrights. There are instances where Dryden is willing to accommodate contemporary practices in theatre, though they may go against Aristotelian norms. Dryden upholds the traditional view regarding the ultimate end of literature and the force of traditional literatures of the past as criteria for standards of judgment. This is convincingly stated in his essay. Dryden takes a historical point of view while examining and judging past writers, but this does not mean that he is a relativist. For him, rules were invented to reform our taste and refine our judgment. According to him, the definition of a play is a just and lively image of human nature, representing its passions and humors, and the changes of fortune to which it is subject, for the delight and instruction of mankind. Historically speaking, Dryden made the classical tradition available to his age and thus was the civilizing factor to his people. The inherent weakness in Dryden's criticism can also be attributed to the inadequacy of English critical system prevailing during his time. It is also true that the French stage, which was different from English, played a major influence in his writings. Dryden's comprehensive knowledge of the tradition and his cosmopolitanism make him a great critic. The usual charge against him is that though he uses didactical form of the dialogue, he does not reward us with any lucid argument. We have thus a substantial body of criticism from Dryden, though not as large as that of Johnson or Arnold, who were the primary critics. Dryden was the poet first and last a critic. No criticism existed in England before him. He was the one who brought criticism from church to the coffee houses. He was a first rate poet with a clear common sense apprehension of men and matters. He had also a sound knowledge of the ancient classics, and to cap it all, he had argumentative faculty best suited to the art of criticism. Dryden is never in the habit of contradicting the views of ancient critics and men of letters on the value of diction and language of poetry. He was uncompromising in his views. He established the English fashion of criticizing as Shakespeare did the fashion of dramatizing. No critic is free from faults, and Dryden too is not faultless. His concessions to tradition, his inconsistencies in his stand, his lack of concreteness and resultant vagueness in argument are some of the weaknesses that do not brook any excuse. It was Dryden who helped the formation of the neoclassical school of literature and criticism in England. He cast his essay in the form of dialogue deliberately with a view of presenting the different points of view and ideas that he had been agitating the minds of his contemporaries, rather than issuing dogmatic statements. We should also realize that among the English critics, he was the first to attempt descriptive criticism. Before Dryden's time, there was mostly judicial and legislative. No tradition as in detailed criticism was available to the Elizabethans. Dryden was the forerunner of that tradition in English criticism that treats the whole European literature as one province. Arnold and Eliot were to follow the suit later. Dryden's superficial style is appreciable. Almost every other critic has justly praised his prose style. His style is fluent and flowing, rhythmic and adorned with deft images. Dryden was a versatile professional man of letters. We get so much caught up in estimating the criticism of Dryden that we are likely to overlook his powers as a translator. The last 2 decades of his fruitful writing career were devoted to translating Greek and Roman classics. Of his own translation, Virgil's Aeneid and Ovid's Epistles stand out. According to him, the primary duty of a translator is to convey to the modern audience the substance and the spirit, the tone and the tenor of the original composition. In other words, what a text did in the source language should be done by its translated version in the target language. Dryden did not approve strict literalism and word for word matching, that is, metaphrase, even as he did not approve of the recreation and translation, that is, imitation. It should be faithful, but an autonomous restatement of the original is what his definition of translation is. His own translations of Ovid's Epistles and Virgil's Aeneid testify his views. Dryden saw very early that the closeness best preserved an author's sense and that the freedom best exhibited his spirit. He therefore will deserve the highest praise who can give a representation at once faithful and pleasing, who can convey the same thoughts with the same graces, and who can translate changes nothing but the language. It is worth mentioning that Virgil left his manuscript of Aeneid unfinished after 11 years of toil, and his translator Dryden did not finish his translation, and after 7 years of labor it was completely satisfied. To conclude, by his enlightened doctrine, his literary appreciation, and his critical methods, he enabled readers not only to perceive fresh beauties in literature but also to understand more clearly excellencies with which they had hitherto but vaguely valued. To conclude, Dryden's work of literary criticism remained a lasting testament.